Welcome back to CBS News, America Decides Campaign 2026. We have a projection in Alabama. The projected winner, Tommy Tuberville, former member of the United States Senate, is going to be the Republican gubernatorial nominee. Next, Alabama governor, Democratic side. Kind of a theme here. Former U.S. senators running for governor. Doug Jones, big lead, not declared the winner. Only 16% of the vote in, but he's got a clear lead. Alabama Senate Republican primary. Barry Moore, endorsed by President Trump. A sizable lead in a crowded field on the Republican side. No projection yet. Only 6% of the vote in. I want to turn now to David Becker, CBS News election law expert and political contributor. David, always great to see you. Walk our audience through redistricting, and then I have some questions for you about data that's being sought by the Trump Justice Department, voting procedures. We'll get to that in a second, but give me your take on redistricting.
Yeah, we're seeing a wave of mid-decade redistricting like we've never seen before in American history. In the previous 50 years, we have seen 3 states in 50 years voluntarily engage in a mid-decade redistricting. In this cycle, we're at 10 already, and that's not even counting Virginia, which was overturned by the Virginia Supreme Court. This is creating potential confusion for voters and real challenges for election officials who are trying to implement that. We're seeing those challenges play out in Missouri right now, where there's a dispute between the Secretary of State and the local election officials that's in the courts over which plan to code voters for when they receive their primary ballots. In Louisiana, they've got a whole new second primary, which didn't even exist a month ago. In Alabama, we've got primaries happening today for some congressional districts, but there's going to be a special election, as Jan mentioned, for 4 congressional districts in August. So this is all very confusing for voters. They've never had to navigate something like this before. And yet, despite all that, we're still seeing very high turnout in the primaries, probably even a little more so on the Democratic side than on the Republican side.
David, I know you spend a lot of time with election administrators. And just for a second, explain to the audience how these variations in the calendar complicate their work, which is already full of a lot of procedures to prepare for both a predictable primary calendar and a predictable general election calendar.
Yeah, they're already dealing with extensive disinformation and conspiracy theories. They've been abused, threatened, and harassed for the last 6+ years. They're under-resourced. They just don't have enough money and staff to do all of the work they're expected to do. And then the legislatures in their states are now requiring them to implement these new redistricting plans. And that requires them to code each voter in the database to make sure they get the right ballot. This is a lot of work. It is manageable if it happens once every 10 years. It's really hard if it happens once every 2 years. If it happens once every 2 years and 6 months before a major midterm election, it's almost impossible. And so it's really a testament to how well they're doing under these incredibly challenging circumstances, that the primaries are going so well. We're seeing a few places where there were minor problems here or there. Of course, we know the Fulton County situation. There was one polling place where there was a lockdown due to a potential security issue. Fortunately, that wasn't a big issue, but they're keeping that polling place open until 11, and we're going to see those Fulton County results after. But we are seeing consistently these elections being run smoothly all over the country.
One other thing I want to raise with you, David, is the Justice Department request for voter rolls. You talked about the data burdens of the new election calendars, the new coding. That has to be another complicating factor, and some states are straight up resisting that.
Yeah, there are 30 states plus D.C. that have been sued by the Department of Justice. These aren't just Democratic states. 5 of the last 6 states that were sued were led by Republican election officials. The DOJ is trying to seize not just the voter lists, which there are public versions of the voter list. They're trying to seize the sensitive data, the Social Security numbers, the driver's license numbers, the dates of birth, as I call it, the holy trinity of identity theft, that states are required by their state laws to protect for very good reason. If anyone gets that information, they could destroy any of us financially at the very least. And so the states are really mostly saying, no, we're not going to share that data. It's a bipartisan group of states. And we've already seen 6 states, 6 of those cases get decisions from the court, and the DOJ has lost all 6 of those states. Just today, there was an argument in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals over 2 of those cases, Oregon and California, which did not go the DOJ's way. We'll see how that appellate court rules. But as a former DOJ voting section lawyer myself, I think it's pretty clear that federal law does not entitle the DOJ to collect this very sensitive information on voters, and the courts are agreeing with that, including in those 6 cases 2 judges appointed by President Trump.
How we vote and the administrators who help us vote, a crucial part of every election cycle. That's why we rely on David Becker. David Becker, great stuff. I am told I am freed from this position and I can actually walk over to see CBS News Elections and Surveys Director Anthony Salvanto. So I'm going to walk, Anthony.
Come on down.
I'm going to walk. It's so freeing. Balance of power. Let's get into it.
Let's talk about it. I've been saying, and I will continue to say, you see this narrow band in here, how many toss-ups, how many House seats we rate as toss-ups, and just a few more on either side that we even rate as leaning to the Dems and the Reps. Historically, this is really narrow. There are not many toss-ups in the House contest.
So do I hear you saying, Anthony, that this is a wave-free environment politically, that there cannot possibly be a wave of any kind?
I am not saying that.
Okay, good.
I am saying that entering into this, one thing you have to remember is that while people say they don't like redistricting, and they don't, right? I always put this number on the board, which is 96%. That's the percentage of partisans who vote for their party all the time. And what that means is you start gerrymandering districts, and all of these on the R side and all of these on the D side, they're probably not going to move because those voters will so reliably stick with their parties. That's how the sort of the ground up version of all of this. But at the same time, would a big wave start to push a little further out into the margins of this? Yes, that is still a possibility.
And Anthony, I always try to think about things that might be on the minds of our audience. Some of our viewers might be saying, wait a minute, I hear stuff all the time anecdotally about people opting out of the Republican Party or the Democratic Party and thinking of themselves and acting behaviorally as independents. Where do they factor, if at all, in any of this?
Well, they don't always vote for different parties. They think of themselves as independents, but more often than not, and they'll tell you this, they fall back to one party or the other.
And more importantly, the parties know that.
And the parties know that. And that's why you see a lot of the debate going on here. And the consultants were just talking about this, where it's about motivation more so than persuasion. It can be that the parties are trying to get people to come out and turn out, which we'll watch closely this year. But it's very expensive and very hard to get people to change their minds. And if I could move very quickly from the House and show you the Senate battlegrounds as well, this is also not a large list, but this is where the Senate control is going to fall in terms of the battlefield here. We talked about Georgia, few that are Democratic held they would have to hold, and then a few that the Republicans hold that they would have to hang on to as well.
And the one thing about North Carolina is we're currently thinking of that as potentially a Democratic pickup.
Yeah, it's a potential pickup. I've got it.
Tom Tillis not seeking re-election.
Exactly.
Michael Whatley, the former Republican National Party chairman, against Roy Cooper, Democratic governor, no longer governor, but ran
statewide office
twice.
Right?
Yes.
One statewide
and
office.
as Attorney General.
It's very hard for the Democrats to flip North Carolina, but the thinking is, the polling suggests, frankly, that he would be the one who could do it. The harder stuff for them is Ohio and Iowa. The reason I say it's harder is these states have a lot of the kinds of voters who have moved toward the Republicans in recent years.
Yes.
Right? White, working class voters, all of
Iowa especially.
Iowa especially, right? It wasn't that long ago the Democrats had Iowa in play. You can remember back to Barack Obama.
Barack Obama.
But nope, Iowa has moved. So the Democrats would like to think they can put that in play. And Alaska, this is kind of a fun one. This one, you could see maybe they use a ranked choice voting system. It could be a little close. They've elected Democrats before. Okay, that's another one we'll keep an eye on.
Anthony Salvanto, great stuff as always. Caitlin, Huey-Burns, and Nikole Killion are in Washington, D.C., side by side. And I'm just noticing this, very color coordinated. Well done. Nikole.
Election green.
Election green. Nikole, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I was going to say green is the new purple on election night, but, a couple of quick
Nikole
points.
Killion for the win. There we go.
Thank you. Just a couple of quick points, though, with respect to the conversation that you're having around the balance of power and redistricting. I think this really, even though that margin is very narrow in terms of potential toss-up seats, what we're seeing with redistricting is this could potentially expand the map, as you've alluded to earlier, with Republicans Republicans. We've already heard from Speaker Mike Johnson this week, according to some reports, telling donors he believes with these redistricting moves that the Republicans could potentially pick up anywhere from 7 to 8 seats. And then just today, you had Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries addressing a progressive conference here in D.C., where he's now looking to 2028 and potentially a number of blue states, upwards of 7 states, that could potentially redraw their maps or be encouraged to redraw their maps, whether that's states like New York, perhaps Virginia again, among others. So I think that is really the dynamic to watch. Now, even still with the dynamics of redistricting, both sides, while Republicans may feel a bit more bullish. I also talked to then our CC chair, Rich Hudson, last week, who said in light of redistricting, yes, they feel a little bit more confident about the map, but keep in mind, folks like Jeffries, the DCCC, still feel that they have a really solid chance here, even if they end up losing seats, particularly because of some of these issues around affordability, the war in Iran, that they feel will pull more voters over to their side. I think the last thing that I would mention, too, just on this redistricting portion, is that you will also likely see a change in the makeup of Congress. So while we talk about the balance of power, there is a lot of discussion, particularly as we see these southern states redistrict, what that does to groups like the Congressional Black Caucus, which have warned they could lose upwards of more than a dozen members. So those are some dynamics to watch as we watch these midterm races continue to play out.
Caitlin, Huey-Burns, what is the conversation on the Senate side of the Capitol, the corridor conversation about the larger national atmospherics and some of the things that Anthony was pointing to? It is a very steep climb. Democrats acknowledge that to attain a Senate Democratic majority after the midterms. But what's the overall atmosphere on both sides that you detect when you talk to senators about what they're seeing, what they're hearing, what they're experiencing?
Well, Major, today was such an interesting test case of this because, yes, it has almost been a foregone conclusion from Republicans and Democrats that the House is just, it's very hard for Republicans to keep, just given the headwinds. The Senate has long been kind of their bulwark then against that. But the dynamics are really important to watch because today, the president endorsed Ken Paxton in Texas. Now, do I think Democrats are going to win Texas? Likely not. It's a huge uphill climb. But now Republicans are going to have to spend a lot of money there to back Paxton. And what was so notable today was that usually you have Republicans on the Senate side, when we press them on these things, kind of toe the party line. Today, they expressed their frustration, they seemed upset about this, some of them, and acknowledged, even people like Lindsey Graham, a close ally of the president, acknowledged that now this is going to cost them a lot of money that they could be spending in other races. So the Senate is still a big uphill climb for Democrats to take. They know that. But they're looking at something like today and the way in which the president makes kind of these unforced errors or makes life a little bit more difficult for Republicans in the Senate. That could be something that, at least in terms of the money involved here, could change the dynamic. We also, tonight in Georgia, we're likely going to see a prolonged primary fight on the Republican side. And Democrats I've been talked to feel like that benefits them, because if you look at Ossoff, he's sitting on a ton of money. And the more time that Republicans have to kind of duke it out through this primary, the less time they have to define Ossoff. And that's what they're going to have to do throughout the summer. Remember, this is a state that the president just won. And so that's kind of the battleground that they are facing. Still an uphill climb, but in terms of the money and resources and kind of infrastructure needed, they need a lot of things to go right.
Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you so very much.